I think this year we are going to see a little plateau with what the market's doing and demand, but it's still going up.
This is the Indy Investor Pod. I am your host, Brett Snodgrass, and I got Kenny Hall on the podcast with me today. He's from the property management company LIV Indy, who I actually just transferred all of our rentals over to at LIV Indy that was met 3 months ago, and just an awesome guy. Raising up the property management integrity. Win together is his motto. So LIV Indy with Kenny Hall. We're getting ready to interview him, but I would just encourage you guys to take a listen. We are relaunching the Indy Investor Pod, as you can tell. So if you guys want to be on the Indy Investor Pod, just reach out to me at brett@simplewholesaling.com. If you know someone that you would love to hear interviewed on the Indy Investor Pod, then please, again, reach out to me at brett@simplewholesaling.com. We are looking for Indy investors. We'd love to talk about Indy investing. And here we go. So here is Mr. Kenny Hall. What's going on, Kenny?
What's up, Brett? Thanks for having me.
Yeah, man. Super excited for this show. Digging deep into property management companies and just to property management in general is something that a lot of real estate investors love to dig into, because honestly, Indianapolis is kind of a hot spot for out-of-state investors, right?
Sure is.
Yeah, man. So I'm super excited to talk about property management in Indianapolis. You're with LIV Indy. Before we dig into just kind of the nuts and bolts of property management, why property management, and what are you doing a little bit differently than some of the other industry, property management companies out there, let's just talk about you. LIV Indy, Kenny Hall. You've been property management, owned this company for a while now. And just talk to us about you and maybe your background, a little history, and LIV Indy.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, real estate has always been a passion of mine. I grew up wanting to be an architect and wanted to be around real estate designing. I have a creative bone in my body and just wanted to put that to action in some way. But I landed in marketing. So I have a marketing degree from Indiana Wesleyan and started off in corporate America at car auction services. And honestly, I loved it. It was fun and taught me some professionalism, taught me quite a bit, but ultimately moved to a tech startup at Springbuck and did health tech there and product management and marketing. And so kind of between sales and engineering and advised in that. But all along the while, still real estate was that passion. And my grandpa owned rentals. So had that in the back of my mind. Hey, this is a good long-term wealth plan. So got into that myself, bought our first place in Home Place in South Carmel neighborhood and lived in that for 2 years, turned it into a rental, was cash flowing really well. And then I got a partner on the personal side and have grown our portfolio to 5 doors now together. And all while got into property management with Matt Spear, founder of LIV Indy. And 2017, he founded it, born out of frustration for property management, things like communication, high vacancies, high fees, hidden fees, and just wanted to do something different. So came on board to help him build that and bought it out and majority owner in 2020 now. So
yeah,
coming on 3 years here. So it's been fun. Good industry. I don't think you grow up ever saying I want to be in property management, but
no.
I've become very passionate about it.
You don't see that. I got elementary students, and I don't see that on their papers very much. Like, what do you want to be when you grow up? I want to be a property manager. I see other things.
Yep, exactly. Yeah, 2 a.m. phone calls, the toilet's leaking, so no way.
Yeah, I know. That's right. It's funny. So I want to just dig into kind of what you talked about. So Matt Spear founded LIV Indy. You took over LIV Indy around 2020. And you said it was really just born out of frustration. And you mentioned a couple of different things. So why are people frustrated with their property management company? Because I see people kind of bounce around sometimes because of frustration. So what are some of the big things that you see that people are frustrated with when it comes to their property management company?
Yeah, I think the number one thing is communication. I think there's not a lot of transparency, especially with out of state investors, they need someone with boots on the ground to be watching over their investment, their property, and take care of it. And if they don't get an update, they don't know. And oftentimes when they hear from their PM, it's something bad, something wrong. So something we've started doing is making sure we're on the phone with at least one or two owners a day right now. So even if that's just a phone call to touch base and see how they're doing, see what their 2023 is looking like. We're a few months into 2023, crazy as it is right now. And what are the goals for people? Are they wanting to grow their portfolio? We're not just the people delivering bad news. We can help with the strategy with that. So
Mhm.
coming at that perspective and our core values win together. So we want to be growing this together with people. And some of that just comes down to talking about it and communication. So that's a big one. Um, I see a lot of hidden fees in property management. I think traditionally it is a pretty low margin business, but I think when done right and growing together, we can be profitable and so can the owners. So I
Mhm.
think that's just transparency and fees. We're not the cheapest out there. We're certainly not the most expensive, but just being transparent and upfront about what the costs that owner will incur throughout the year. So there's no surprises. I think that's
Mhm.
the biggest thing is you get a surprise fee on that owner statement every month and you start to get frustrated. You feel blindsided. You feel like, man, this is supposed to be my retirement. Now I'm losing money.
Mhm.
What's happening here? Just
Mhm.
transparency in those fees is key. And then doing all we can to reduce that vacancy, right? If it's rented and money's coming in the door to pay that mortgage that you've got, then great. That's awesome. We can now strategize on other things like maintenance or um, what's your expected lease turnover, things like that that we can talk about. But if it's not rented, nothing else matters at that point. So
Mhm.
keeping our days on market low and really looking to perform well to get quality tenants in there.
Mhm.
Those are the things we've been focusing on and making sure we're always improving.
Yeah.
So that's kind of where the frustration was born and why I see a lot of people jumping around those three things.
Yeah. Yeah, I think the first thing he said, communication, which I think is huge. I mean, so I've actually, guys, just to be totally transparent, I've actually transitioned over to LIV Indy. I've gotten to know Kenny. We've had coffee together. He did reach out to me just the other day, just to see how things were going. We've been under your guys' umbrella now for just a couple months. So and it's been really, really good. One of the frustrating things for me was, yeah, just those hidden fees. And honestly, when you say hidden fees, like, I don't even know what they're for. I just know that things were really expensive, and that was one of those things. So like, what are some examples with like hidden fees that property management companies could charge, that are hidden fees? And because a lot of times when we're getting introduced to a property management company, we kind of look at you know the management fee, right? And that's really kind of what we look at. We look at maybe the references, and are they going to be good? Do we feel like they have integrity? But really, most of the time, we're looking at the management fee, and we kind of go with one that we think is the best or the cheapest or whatever. But that's not
Mhm.
always the best way to go. So talk to us about, like, what are some of those hidden fees that management companies kind of put in there?
Well, I'm a big believer in hard work pays off, and I think you are paying a set fee. Our traditional fee is 10% a month, and that is what we charge. I think that's fair market value for it. Some have charged 8%, some will charge 12%, but we're right there in the middle, and I don't think that we're the cheapest option, but you pay for what you get too. And
Mm-hmm.
so, some of the things that I've seen as a hidden fee, or just lack of communication on fees is probably more what it is. Read your full landlord agreement. They're probably in there, but they're maybe buried. Things like property annual inspections. So we'll do one in the fall and we'll do one in the spring. In the fall, we focus on the exterior, making sure the gutters are cleaned out, the brush is trimmed away from the house, the water is getting away from the house with downspouts. We do those for free. That's
Mm-hmm.
like an expectation in my perspective that we should be taking care of the property at least once or twice a year, visiting it. In the spring, we'll go back again and we do an interior property walkthrough. Typically, those charges are anywhere from $100 to $300 on someone's traditional expenses. And that's someone's cash flow for a whole month.
Mm,
And that you're still paying me and LIV Indy a 10% fee. I personally think that that's an opportunity for us to just include that in our services and do a really good job and grow together, because now you're understanding the condition of your property twice a year on a property condition report we'll send you after that walkthrough.
mm,
And then you just understand what's going on. You might strategize with us and contract us to do some landscaping. There's some money opportunity made for the management company, but you've now seen what the condition is of the property. So that's just one way that we try to reduce some
yeah.
surprise costs.
That's awesome. That's awesome. You also mentioned just kind of reducing vacancy. And in my experience with sometimes the relationship with the property management company is that maybe we want to try to increase rent. And I know that, that's a great thing. Increase rent, try to get the most money out of that property. That is the market rent for that particular property. But I've also seen sometimes there's a tenant living there, and let's say they're paying $1,000 a month, for example, for this rental, and maybe some people might say, well, I want to get that tenant out because I want them to pay $1,100 a month. I'm going to raise the rent by $100 a month. So they need to move because they don't want to pay that. But then they move, you get into the property, you probably have some turnover types of costs and some things you have to do. So you got to spend, maybe a couple grand there. And then maybe it's vacant for another month or two. And then, you finally get it leased up. They're moving in. Now it's vacant for 2 months. You spend a few grand. And so now you're like $5,000. You lost a couple of grand in rent, $3,000 in maintenance costs. Now you're $5,000 in. And really to get that back is you're 2 or 3 years to kind of
Sure.
recoup what could have been if they just would have stayed, I guess,
Sure.
right? So I want to
Absolutely.
get your take on that, about just that reduction of vacancy, and what's your mindset with that as far as the balance between raising the rent to as much as you can
Hmm.
versus keeping the tenant in there that maybe isn't squeezing them for every penny. What's your
Yeah.
relationship with that?
Yeah, I think it goes back to our core value, win together. That applies to the tenant as well. And I think we've got to create this relationship that wins with the tenant to make sure they're happy in their home and we're taking good care of it. But also, our first and primary interest is the client, you, the owner. So let's say this $1,000 rent, and Indy's market in certain neighborhoods has gone up 18 to 30% in some neighborhoods in rent. And so, would we be doing you a disservice to keep it at $1,000 for rent and move versus moving this tenant out and getting a new tenant in there? I do think there's high costs incurred with turn costs, depending on how long the property has been lived in. But maybe the conversation is, rather than just keeping it $1,000, go back to the tenant and say, hey, we do want you to stay. We really like having you as a tenant. We really appreciate you paying on time and submitting maintenance requests in a timely manner. So we want to offer you another opportunity to stay another year, but rent's going to be 1,020. Go
Mm-hmm.
up $20.
Mm-hmm.
Just keeping that expectation that rent does increase in a growing metropolitan area. And I
Mm-hmm.
think that's an expectation tenants should understand when they're renting. And if you just keep it at the same, then you're going to be too far from future market rent to be able to absorb some of those future tenant turn costs. So,
Mm-hmm.
in the best interest, if the tenant wants to stay, raise it $20, 25, 30 in that sweet spot, so that you are then banking on some return for a future tenant turn cost when that tenant does inevitably move out. That's some of it. And I think the win together there is the tenant gets to stay. You're getting a little bit more. We're, signing that renewal lease. That's a huge win.
Mm-hmm.
But let's say the tenant doesn't want to move 120 days out from a known move out date. We're asking and having that conversation with the tenant. Hey, do you want to move or do you want to sign a renewal? And we give them a 30-day window to make that decision. That way at day 90, we know, are you moving out or not? And then we'll market the property accordingly while they're still in there to try to avoid future vacancy.
Mm. That's awesome. I love it. Sounds good. So we've talked a lot about the frustrations with the property management company and how investors are frustrated with the hidden fees, with some of the surprises, and they kind of bounce around from management company to management company every couple of years. Let's talk about maybe some of the frustrations from the management company's point of view with investors, so that the investors, most of the people living or listening to this, are real estate investors in Indianapolis. And what are some of your frustrations with investors, that how can we treat you better or communicate better, or what can we do better to build that healthy relationship with our property management company and the tenants, I guess, and the properties?
Hmm. That's a great question. Not one that client for one, and yeah, not a lot of people ask. I do appreciate the question. I think a lot of it just comes down to communication on their end as well. Treat us with respect. We do have to deliver hard news, and if that water heater goes out and it's $1,200 to repair, that's tough news to deliver, and it's your classic don't shoot the messenger. That could ruin someone's day, someone's month. I empathize with that, owning rental properties myself. That kills your cash flow for 3 months or so, and that is tough. Those are hard conversations on our end to have, and I think you just receiving that in a way that understanding that we don't necessarily want to deliver this news, but we're in the business of problem solutions. And I think, you hire us for a reason to deal with the tough stuff and the maintenance requests that come at times you don't really want to deal with it. And that's the reason that we exist. So I think just communication and treating with respect just goes a really long way, and looking to grow together and continue to win together. That goes a long way.
Yeah, that's awesome. What are some maintenance things just to really keep, ahead and be preventative on your properties that you guys kind of do? You mentioned you do the biannual inspections, but as the owner, what can we kind of think about to communicate with you some of those preventative measures in Indianapolis when we have the Indianapolis weather? What are some things versus summer, winter that we can do to help make sure we don't have these big surprises and do some preventative care on the
Yeah, I think
properties?
the biggest one that happens in the fall with our exterior walkthrough is a gutter clean out. And we might charge 175 for a single story gutter clean out, or a little bit more for 2-story, but just making sure that water is falling off the roof and getting away from the home just is massive. Water management on a property is just a really, really big importance thing from preventive management. You don't want that water to pool next to your foundation. A lot of block foundations in Indy and a lot of somewhat wet basements. It just creates a environment that's asking to be a large expense down the road. So I think that's number one big one, is water away from the home with gutters and your foundation grading. Number two, again, it's just exterior. It's the roof cleanup. There's a lot of big trees in Indy, and I think if you have a big windstorm like we've been having quite a bit lately here in Indy, making sure that there's no branches on the roof, and if one had fallen, get up on there, walk around. Did it put a little hole in the roof that's going to be a leak? I'd rather replace a little shingle management issue than having to replace some decking that got a lot of water under it because of a small hole that just wasn't addressed. So things like that can be really big expenses down the road if not managed properly. Those are good. And then I think interior, come the spring, I do find a lot of tenants are somewhat afraid to submit maintenance requests. So if they see a small P-trap leak underneath the sink, they'll put a bowl under there. And then you see that bowl collecting water. And then you're like, hey, why didn't you submit this maintenance request? Oh, I didn't want to bother you. It's like, no, that's literally our job. And we want to take care of that, because now your, $50 to $75 P-trap fix is a $300 vanity because the whole thing's rotted out and you just can't salvage it. And so that kind of stuff is caught, and wish we could catch a lot of it sooner, but now it's a management thing. So we do go inside and make sure that those small things are addressed. Your furnace filters are addressed on a quarterly basis. Just keeping that thing clean and air flowing well is a lot of the no heat and no AC issues. Is just change that furnace filter. So
Yeah.
a lot of those things. I think that's just a quick list off the top of my head.
Yeah, no, that's awesome. Thank you so much for that. So investors pay attention to that, especially in Indianapolis. So again, this is Indianapolis specific, in Indiana with your weather. So if you're out west, yeah, you don't think about some of these things like we do out here. Last question for you, Kenny, before we wrap this up is Indianapolis investing just in general. So a lot of people that are listening right now, maybe they've been investing in the past few years. Maybe they're just getting started. Maybe they've stopped investing here in Indianapolis because of some of the other things going on out west, maybe in their market, or they're just kind of paralyzed with they don't really know what's going to happen. So what would you say right now as far as the rental market, buying rental properties here in Indianapolis? Can you kind of just talk about that? Like why should someone really look at Indianapolis as an investment rental cash flow market?
Man, I have just continually been excited about Indy and its infrastructure. A lot of money still coming into Indy. Multiple billion-dollar projects have just been announced or underway. So there's a lot of commercial development still happening, bringing a lot of jobs to the area. So you're still going to see a lot of demand for housing while inventory is still very short. Builders can't keep up at this point. There's a lot of opportunity for an investor to do a light improvement and offer a quality product for people moving here for a better cost of living. We see the coast moving here, and you get a doctor, attorney, someone with a higher paying job on the West Coast coming here, and they're like, "What can I rent for under $4,000?" I'm like, "Literally anything. Like just pick." And
Yeah.
here's a quality product, and you just offer that kind of solution, and it's great. But on the flip side of that, with investors. Someone coming here saying, I want something for $4,000. This is a real story. We are going to see rents continue to increase with demand like that. So I think this year we are going to see a little plateau with what the market's doing and demand, but it's still going up. It's just not going to go up like it did last year. But with everything coming and jobs being needed, so I think it's a great time to get in while we still see rents going up in Indy and inventory needs.
That's awesome. Thank you so much, Kenny Hall, LIV Indy. Appreciate you being on the podcast today. Guys, make sure you look up Kenny Hall. And Kenny, I just want to give you an opportunity. Usually I don't do this. We don't do a lot of promotions, but I want to give you opportunity because, again, someone looking for that property management company, if they do want to contact you, if they have certain questions and that you can answer here about Indianapolis rental properties and property management, where can they go?
Yeah, I appreciate that. Best place, liveindy.co. LIVINDY.co.
Sounds good. Check that out, guys. We're going to put that in our show notes as well. Liveindy.co. That's LIVINDY.co. And it's a wrap with Kenny Hall. Thank you so much, buddy.
Thank you.